They stood at the gate, tickets in hand, excitement written across their faces. For the twin sisters, this flight meant more than just travel. It was the beginning of a long-awaited adventure. But when the attendants' eyes scanned their boarding passes, the smiles faded. Without reason, without explanation, they were told they could not board. Passengers behind them shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, others watching in silence. What could two teenage girls have possibly done wrong? What happened next would not only shake the airline to its core, but leave the entire flight industry questioning its future. The sisters had grown up in a quiet suburban neighborhood, known by everyone at school not just for looking alike, but for their confidence, their laughter, and the way they lit up any room. This trip was supposed to be a reward. Months of saving, planning, and dreaming had finally brought them here to the airport terminal. Their backpacks were stuffed with snacks, books, and carefully folded outfits. It was their first time traveling alone, without their parents, and the independence felt electric. They checked in early, breezed through security, and even stopped for photos near the giant departure board. Nothing about this day seemed unusual, at least, not yet. As the boarding call approached, they joined the line, chatting excitedly about where they'd sit, what movies they'd watch, and how they couldn't wait to land. But as they reached the front, something shifted. The attendant's smile faltered. Her gaze lingered longer than usual, narrowing slightly as she looked from one twin to the other. She took their tickets, scanned them once, then again, before pulling them aside. Passengers continued boarding, but the twins were left standing, clutching their bags, confused and embarrassed. The line kept moving. People behind them glanced over, curious but unwilling to say anything. The girls exchanged nervous looks. What was happening? They had the right flight, the right seats. They had done nothing wrong. Yet, in that moment, they couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't about their tickets at all. It was about who they were, and something inside told them this was only the beginning of a battle they never expected to fight. The attendant leaned across the counter, her voice low but firm. "I'm sorry, you can't board this flight." The twins froze, exchanging looks of disbelief. "Why not?" one asked softly, but the woman avoided their eyes, tapping furiously at her keyboard, as though searching for an excuse. Behind them, the line thinned out. Passengers were already buckling their seatbelts, while the sisters remained stranded at the gate, their cheeks burning with humiliation. The attendant finally spoke again. "Your tickets are invalid. You'll need to step aside." Invalid. The girls knew that wasn't true. They had booked weeks ago, confirmed the details twice, and even printed extra copies just in case. They held them out again, pointing to their names, the correct flight number, and the matching seats. Still, the attendant shook her head. Other staff members gathered, whispering. A man in uniform appeared, arms folded, his expression cold. "You'll need to wait until this matter is resolved," he said, as though the twins were a problem to be managed rather than paying passengers. The girls' voices trembled. "But we did everything right. Why won't you let us on?" The AGD answer never came. Instead, passengers inside the plane peered through the windows, curious about the delay. A mother guided her child past quickly, avoiding eye contact. A businessman muttered under his breath about holding up the flight. But no one stepped forward. No one asked the question that hung heavy in the air. Would this be happening if they didn't look the way they did? Minutes turned to nearly half an hour. Their phones buzzed with texts from friends who were waiting for photos from the trip, unaware of the scene unfolding. The twins shifted from anger to fear. What if they missed the flight? What if the airline left them stranded? One of them finally pulled out her phone and, with shaky fingers, dialed a number she rarely used for emergencies. On the other end of the line was the one person who had always told them, "If anyone ever treats you unfairly, don't stay silent." It was their father. Calm at first, they explained what had happened, trying not to cry as uniformed staff hovered nearby. He listened silently, every detail sharpening his focus. What the staff didn't know, what the passengers didn't suspect, was that this man was not just any father. He was the CEO of the very airline that had just humiliated his daughters in front of dozens of witnesses. And the moment his voice reached the operations office, the chain of command shifted. Supervisors were alerted. Calls were made. Within minutes, the same employees who had dismissed the girls with cold indifference found themselves scrambling for answers. The twins, still standing in disbelief, didn't yet realize that the situation was about to flip entirely, and that the people who had denied them entry were about to face consequences far greater than they ever imagined. The atmosphere at the gate shifted almost instantly. Staff members who had once spoken with icy certainty now whispered frantically into radios, glancing nervously at the twins as though they were no longer mere passengers, but the center of something much larger. Within minutes, a senior manager arrived, his expression tight with panic. He pulled the gate attendant aside, and their hushed argument carried enough urgency to send shivers through the crowd. The twins clutched their bags, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. Then, without warning, the loudspeaker crackled. "Attention passengers, this flight has been temporarily delayed." Gasps rippled across the terminal. People groaned, phones came out to capture the scene, and speculation spread like wildfire. The manager approached the sisters, his voice trembling now with forced politeness. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding. We'll get this sorted right away." But it was too late. The phone call their father had made wasn't just a demand for answers. It was a direct order. Flights across the terminal were suddenly paused. Ground staff froze, supervisors scrambled, and word spread quickly through the airline's internal system. The CEO himself was watching. The attendant who had denied them boarding tried to melt into the background, but there was no escape. A pair of higher-ranking officials confronted her, their faces grim. Passengers filmed every moment, and whispers grew louder. Why were these girls singled out? What really happened here? The twins stood rooted to the spot, their hearts racing as the weight of the moment sank in. They hadn't just been refused entry to a plane, they had been publicly stripped of dignity for no reason other than the color of their skin. And now, in a twist no one expected, the very man in charge of the airline was demanding accountability. For the first time that day, it wasn't the girls who were under scrutiny. It was the airline, and every eye in that crowded terminal waited to see what would happen next. Within the hour, the truth was undeniable. The sisters had done everything right, checked in on time, held valid tickets, followed every rule. The only thing that had separated them from every other passenger was the color of their skin. And that fact, laid bare in front of hundreds of witnesses, left the airline scrambling for explanations it could never justify. The attendant who had dismissed them so casually was escorted away, her protests drowned out by the low buzz of angry voices. Managers apologized. Supervisors promised reviews, and staff suddenly spoke with syrupy politeness. Yet for the twins, no apology could erase the sting of humiliation, the shame of being told you don't belong when they had done nothing wrong. Their father arrived hours later, not as a CEO, not as a powerful figure commanding authority, but as a father who held his daughters tightly, his face marked with both pride and pain. He promised that what had happened would not be buried under corporate statements or quiet settlements. This moment, caught on dozens of phones, would not fade into silence. News of the incident spread quickly. Videos went viral, sparking outrage, debate, and a painful truth. Even in places meant to be neutral, like an airport gate, racism found a way to surface. The story was no longer just about two teenage girls. It was about every person who had ever been told they didn't belong, every traveler forced to justify their presence, every family made to feel lesser because of the color of their skin. That night, the sisters finally made it home. Not broken, but changed. They had seen the ugly face of injustice up close, but they had also seen the power of standing up, of refusing to stay silent. And as the world debated what had happened, one haunting question remained. If this is what it takes for justice to be seen, how many others suffer unseen, unheard, and unrecorded every single day? And that was the story of two sisters who faced discrimination in plain sight and turned it into a moment the world could not ignore. Stories like this remind us that racism doesn't always hide in shadows. Sometimes it stands at the gate, daring us to look away. But silence is the fuel that keeps it alive. So let me ask you, if you had been there, would you have spoken up? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your voice. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that shine a light where others want to keep it dark. Because until the world listens, these stories must be told.